guys, what's up? It's me again, Tom from TTT Tom's Tech Time. Today we want to throw a look at the very best settings for the DJI Phantom 4 within the superb Go app. Let's get our mobile devices ready. Get a cup of coffee. It's gonna take 20 minutes in total. Enjoy the episode, stay tuned, and don't forget to click at the subscribe button and leave a thumb up. That was wrong. Don't forget to leave a thumb up and click at the subscribe button while the astronaut dances. First of all, let's turn on our DJI Phantom 4s, connect them with the remote controller and connect the remote controller with the mobile device. And let me note that the DJI Go app performs and looks a little different on the different devices. So if you're using an Android device, it might look a little different, but don't get confused, the settings are the same, no worries. Let's first of all hit add camera to enter the live view. And once the live view is up and running, we can already tap at the quadcopter looking alike symbol, and that brings up the MC settings menu. And the first setting that we find is the home point setting. Actually, we do not have to play around with the home point setting. The home point will be set as normally. If you turn on your Phantom, it then logs into the GPS and GLONASS satellites, and that will be your home point. And if you want to change the home point in flight, you can return here and reset the home point. Next is the multiple flight mode with the P positioning mode, with the S sport mode and the A attitude mode. And if you want to be able to use those, for example, up here with the forward obstacle sensing and the vision positioning system and stuff like that, please enable the multiple flight modes. That's the only way you can get the most out of your DJI Phantom 4. Next is the return to home altitude. Let me briefly cover what the return to home function does. If the remote controller, if the signal between the remote controller and the DJI Phantom breaks down for some weird reason, the Phantom will travel to a desired height and then return to the home point in a straight line and then safely land there. And we gotta set that very desired height. And why is that so important? Only keep in mind that there could be a tree or a building or something like that in between the way, and if the Phantom hits that, yeah, we all know the ending of that. You would say, oh, it was DJI's fault. No, just kidding. Just to prevent those accidents from happening, we should put a safe number in here, and for, I don't know, normal purposes, like 60 meters should work out. But keep in mind that if you are flying in urban areas, of course with the permission only, if you are flying in urban areas, you should raise that number so that the return to home altitude is higher than the highest building or obstacle surrounding you. Next, we can choose whether we want to use the beginner mode or not. And if this is your very first flight, you might want to turn it on. But actually, no one needs the beginner mode. If you are a complete newbie to the DJI Phantom series, simply go outdoors, choose the right location, a wide open field, and you will be good to go. If you, if you stay conservative, if you don't get too crazy, if you only act normally, no one will need the beginner mode then. Next is the maximum flight altitude, and the maximum flight altitude is set onto 120 meters, and we should keep it at that limit. I think for, I don't know, cinematography reasons, most of the time we won't need to fly higher than that limit. It actually looks even cooler if you're flying lower to the ground. I think we should all pay a lot of attention to small airports or even bigger airports surrounding us. Don't interfere with the airplanes, and that will only cause us more restrictions, and we don't want anything to happen. So let's keep this on 120 meters. Next, we can enable the maximum flight distance away from us. But actually, I am never enabling that. I disable that. And the basic rule is to keep the UAV in a line of sight, and that way you will be good to go. Next, we can hit add advanced settings, and that brings up the gain and Expo Tuning settings, and those settings are quite interesting. Let's hit add Expo at first. And we see that two submenus pop up, the normal and the sport submenu, and the function is actually the very same. While the normal one only refers to the normal flight modes, the sport one refers to, the sport mode. Let me shortly cover what the Expo setting does and what it means. We see 3 coordinate systems, and each of that has an x-axis and a y-axis, and we're having an exponential curve, the blue line, with a yellow needle in it. This is the throttle for the up and down movement of the copter. This is the rudder for the rotation, the yaw movement, and this is the forward, backward for the forward or backward flight of the copter. And now let's just set that. And actually, what does that change? If we slow one of these down, the copter will react more sluggish. It will react slower, which is awesome for filmmaking, because I've seen many DJI Phantom pilots getting into trouble when trying to achieve awesome shots when rotating the copter. And actually, we can avoid uneven movement, and we want to make things more fluid again. We want to slow the movement of the yaw down, and we can simply do that by holding onto the yellow needle and dragging it down. Actually, I'm not holding onto the needle, but onto the exponential curve. And now we see that the exponential curve has changed, and it looks a little different. If I now take the left stick and move that to the left or right, as I would do when rotating the copter in air, we can see that the yellow needle stays on the x-axis at the beginning. And this is pretty cool, because the copter only really starts to rotate around its own axis when walking up and down the y-axis, and I really need a lot of input to make it go up and down the y-axis. And let's just make it a straight line. Excuse me. Like that. And if I now take the stick and move it to the left and right, you can see that the copter reacts immediately, and that is not what we want. We want the copter to react more sluggish, and the perfect value for that is 0.3. And I think if you take a look at the sport mode, you can see that there are straight lines only, no exponential curves, and that is pretty good, of course, for the sport mode, because in the sport mode you want the copter to react pretty much aggressively to the input. And in normal mode we only want to set the rudder value to 0.3. Let's head back and open up the sensitivity. And actually, we should let the sensitivity set as it is, because it is set correctly. And next is the gain. And the gain is pretty interesting, because the gain actually almost does the same as the Expo. It slows the copter's reactions down, or it makes them faster and more aggressive. But there is one big difference between the gain and the Expo setting. Keep in mind that the gain settings only refer to external influences such as wind speeds or, I don't know, pressure changes or something like that. The gain settings do not affect the movement of the copter that you control with the remote controller. And that is why we don't need to change anything. I think 100 works out perfectly. Only if the copter reacts too aggressive or too sluggish in air, I don't know, to wind gusts or something like that, you should then return here and change the values. But I've got to be honest, I never had to change those values. Next, let's tap at sensors, and we see the two IMUs, and I could actually calibrate the IMU. As you can see, it's on yellow. The second IMU is on yellow. But as long as it's not on red, I would say we don't have to do it. But of course, if we wanted to make absolutely sure, we could of course now calibrate the IMU. Next is the compass. And as you can see, the compass is absolutely poorly. And there is a lot of interference, but I can't change that even if I now calibrate the compass. That is because my copter is currently placed on an iron plate outside of my balcony. Not outside of my balcony. It's set onto an iron plate on my balcony, and I can't change that. Of course, we should never place our copters on iron surfaces because that will interfere with the compass. So let's just say if your compass would look like that and not be standing on an iron plate, you should definitely go and calibrate the compass. Let's just head back and let's take a look at the RC signal lost. What is the UAV to do if the remote controller signal gets lost? Of course, it is supposed to return to home. And if you want to change that, you can set that to landing or hover. But I have experienced return to home to be the safest and best method. Next is the Smart Go Home, and we should enable the Smart Go Home because the Smart Go Home is really smart. Let me shortly explain that, and let's close the menu for a second. Let's take a look at the upper left hand side, and we are having a red, yellow and green bar up here, and that bar actually shows the battery life. Not only the battery life, but it shows how much time we've got left for flying, and that thing is really smart because of course the further we move away from the home point, the longer it would take the copter to return to that home point, and that system calculates that in real time. It's pretty cool, and with a smart function enabled, the copter will tell you when you will need to return to the home point, because you might, I don't know, you might still be in the green level, and still you might not be able to return safely to the home point. But with the smart function enabled, the system will tell you when to return to home, and otherwise you might run out of power and land, I don't know, in the field or in the water or whatever is surrounding you. Next, we should disable the turn on arms LED light. And why is that so? Simply because as a filmmaker, I want to turn off all the external different light sources, and especially if they are flashing as the arms LED lights, even though I have never seen the flashes interfere with the lens. So still I would turn it off if I don't need it, and if I'm not planning on filming or so, I would turn them on for safety reasons. And yeah, it's as simple as that. Next up is the visual navigation system. And first of all, we can decide whether we want the turn on forward obstacle sensing system to be enabled or not. And I would say yes, keep that system enabled, but please guys keep in mind that the obstacle sensing system is not a lifesaver in all various different situations. It only functions on during forward flight or when flying lower to the ground. It does not work when flying to the right or left or to the back. And next to that, we should keep in mind that it doesn't always see, I don't know, small branches or power lines or stuff like that, even in forward flight. And you gotta fly pretty slow for it to be able to stop if there is an obstacle in front of it. I couldn't say I don't like the system. It's a pretty smart system, but still I wouldn't trust it. I would fly conservatively as I normally would. I wouldn't go further than without the system. Next is the TapFly. Allow horizontal obstacle avoidance. If activated, aircraft will automatically fly around detected obstacles. It's pretty self-explaining actually. So if it detects an obstacle, it will fly around that obstacle and not hover in air and wait for you to act with a remote controller. You can activate that, but still you should keep in mind that, for example, if you are flying close to a tree and the UAV says, oh, there is a tree and I gotta stop and now I want to fly around it. The problem might be that it doesn't note the branches, and if it doesn't note the branches, it might fly around the tree, but it might hit the branches. So be careful when activating that. Next is the ActiveTrack enable backward flying. And being honest, I would always leave that disabled. Only in very special situations I would enable that system, because we gotta keep in mind that the DJI Phantom 4 does not feature any obstacle sensing systems on the back. And during backward flying, I mean, you can hit a power line, you can hit, I don't know, a tree or a building or whatever is behind the copter. So only if you are flying pretty high and over all the obstacles surrounding you, I would then turn it on, or when flying over wide open fields, you could then turn it on. But for normal reasons, I am definitely going to leave the enable backward flying disabled. Next up is the RC control settings menu. And inside the RC control settings menu, we find the gimbal wheel speed, and that is set onto 50, which is absolutely fine. Next is the RC calibration. We could calibrate our remote controller, don't need to do that now. Next is the stick mode, and it is currently set to mode 2, which is absolutely fine again. No need to change that. And finally, which is very interesting, is the button customization, and we can customate this Z1 and Z2 button. And I am always placing camera forward down on Z1, and I'm always placing the advanced camera settings on Z2, but that is finally up to you, whatever you like the best. I'm a filmmaker. That's probably why I like having all the camera functions and settings right by a tip of a finger. Want to be able to change those right away. Next, let's tap at HD, which opens up the image transmission settings, and let's just keep those set onto auto. That always works out pretty well. Next, let's hit at the battery symbol, and the aircraft battery submenu opens up, and this one is actually pretty interesting. You can not only screen the battery life in total, the total capacity or the remaining power or stuff like that, but you can set the low battery warning level to 30%, This is perfect, and the critical battery warning level to 10%, which works out well as well. Next, we could hit at advanced settings down here, and we can set the time to discharge down to 3 days only, which means that after 3 days, if you are having a fully charged battery and not using that, after 3 days it will start to discharge itself. And actually, if you want to save some money, if you want to have a long-lasting battery, you should set that level down. You should, really, it should be on 3 days or even lower, but that's finally up to you. If you want to get in touch with more rules about the intelligent flight batteries, hit at that link popping up right now. Or if that link doesn't pop up on your mobile device or computer or whatever you're watching this video at, the link is in the video description as well. Let's just return, and finally let's hit at the gimbal menu down here. And we can set a gimbal mode, and we are having two options, either follow or FPV. What one is the better one? Follow is actually for cinematography reasons, which means that the camera will always be stable, while FPV is kind of like a flight simulator experience. So if you're turning the copter, the camera turns with it aggressively and stuff like that. But again, for filmic purposes, I would always have this set on to follow. Next, let's hit at advanced settings. And in here, we should change the gimbal tilt, because if I now tilt the gimbal, this is a pretty mechanical movement, as you can see. Let's set this down to 50 or around 50. Yeah, 48 should be working out as well. Let me now move the gimbal a little better, but still we can see that the ending and the beginning, they don't fade, which means, again, take a look at it. Pretty mechanical. And if I now take the gimbal tilt smooth track, I can fade that, and the perfect level is 17 till 19. And if I now move it, look at it, it will fade in. Boom. And if I let go, fade in, let go. Pretty cool. Not too slow, not too fast, but with the fade in and fade out, which is pretty cool. And we should not enable the upwards gimbal tilt, because if you do so, you will of course be able to, I don't know, tilt the gimbal 30 degrees up, but you will only see your propellers. Not that interesting for a serious film project. Next, we should leave the enable synchronized gimbal pan follow enabled for smoother images when rotating our copter. Finally, let's hit at this menu down here, which is the general settings menu. And let's first of all set our unit of measurement. And I've set that to the metric system. And of course, the Americans are going to set it to the imperial system, even though I gotta say I'm absolutely in love with the metric system and I wouldn't want to give it away. Yeah, next is the YouTube live streaming. Let's disable that. And next is the enable hardware decoding. Let's leave this enabled, because the hardware decoding really helps. And it simply offers a better and more fluid playback on our mobile device. Next is the map submenu, and the first point is show flight route. And I would prefer leaving this turned on, because seeing the flight route can be pretty helpful. For example, if you've lost the visual contact but don't want to activate the return to home, you can simply open up the map and then return home. Next, we can calibrate map coordinates, but as we can see, this is for China mainland only. So let's keep this turned off if we are all living outside of China. And I am living outside of China. Next is cache map in the background. This function is very helpful if you are not having a cell service running on your mobile device. And I'm leaving this enabled because my iPad does not have a cell service. If I'm flying outdoors, I won't have a map because the map can't be downloaded. How can I get that done? I simply enable cache map in the background, and I then prior to the flight, at home when having an internet connection, I open up the map and search the area that I will be flying at, then scroll over the map, and then the map will be saved in the background, which means that if I then go to the location, I then can open up the map and the map will be saved, which is pretty nice with no internet connection. Let's scroll down. Next is the video cache. The video cache should be set to recording, actually. If your mobile device has enough space left and if it has enough power, And if the workflow in total is fluid, you can set this to recording just because it's pretty awesome. The Go app will then save the recorded film footage as well, and only in 720p though. But that's pretty cool because you can, after the flight, already start watching your footage, and you could even edit it. There is a small editor, even though that editor doesn't replace the real computer-based editor. And that's pretty cool for reviewing the footage. But again, if you are experiencing problems with the transmission or so, then disable it. Next, we can activate the auto cleanup video cache larger than 2 GB because we don't want our mobile device to end up, I don't know, filled with different huge files. And that way we will end up with a faster running device. That was already it. If you want to know the very best settings for cinematography reasons, check out this tutorial of mine popping up right now. The link can be found in the description as well. And if you want to be really cool, you should subscribe and leave a thumb up. And if you want to be even cooler, you could check out tomstechtime.com/donate and hit the donate PayPal donation button. Yeah, I'm getting weird accent right now. And you could hit that button, and you then could support my work, and I could continue filming more awesome tutorials. And now I'm talking too much again. Thanks for watching this tutorial. This was Tom from TTT Tom's Tech Time. Stay tuned, fly safe, over and out, and don't forget to share this video.